Hello, and welcome to By the Numbers, the series where we look at the new Dungeons & Dragons 2024 edition, or 5.5. We look at each of the classes in this new edition and see how they stack up numerically. We'll analyze all the features, run numbers on them, and then we'll make a stereotypical build for the class. We'll measure their damage, control, durability, and mental resistance. And we'll compare that to 2014. I'll also show you where they sit in comparison to the other 2024 classes. Today's class is the Ranger. 2014 Ranger suffered from a couple of issues. It had poor damage scaling at later levels, and it had some bland features that sometimes felt too niche to be useful. They got a boost in Tasha's, and people received that well, and that basically is the 2024 Ranger. If you also took a glowing, bedazzled Hunter's Mark and tacked it on there. There has been a lot of controversy in the community about Ranger, especially focused around Hunter's Mark. The designers chose to focus a significant number of features around Hunter's Mark, and people are not happy about it. I'll get to it later in the video after we've taken a look at the math, but know that even if the Ranger does well mathematically, it still might feel bad. I hope that this will shed some light so we can have a better understanding about it. Let's dive into the features. At level 1, Rangers get a feature called Favored Foe. Traditionally, Rangers were better at hunting specific types of enemies, like giants or spiders or whatever. This Favored Foe is more general. You just deal extra damage. The way it does it is by giving you free castings of the Hunter's Mark spell. Starting off right away. We start with 2 free castings a day, and we scale all the way up to 6. First, let's take a look at the Hunter's Mark spell, since it's very important. It's a bonus action cast, concentration spell, and it deals an extra 1d6 force damage whenever you hit that target with an attack. You can use the bonus action to move it to a new creature once the old creature dies, and you can upcast it, but it only increases the duration. It also gives some rangery effect where you can see them and track them better. Now, because it is concentration, it's going to compete with a lot of other spells for what we'll use to boost our damage in combat. In a moment, I will compare all the different options and see how much damage they will deal compared to Hunter's Mark. But right now, I want to fast forward into the Ranger's future to see all the features that do link with Hunter's Mark, so we get a more holistic picture. At level 13, we get a feature that prevents us from losing concentration on Hunter's Mark when we take damage. At level 17, we get advantage on all attacks on our Hunter's Mark target. That's pretty significant. At level 20, our capstone is that our Hunter's Mark increases from a d6 damage to a d10 damage. So in total, that's 4 features from the Ranger base class that are dedicated to Hunter's Mark. But some subclasses also have features that are linked to Hunter's Mark as well. The Hunter subclass has 2 features linked to it, and the Beastmaster has 1 feature. Okay, I have to be clear. That is a lot of features dedicated to this one spell. Think about Warlocks. Warlocks are known for being focused on Eldritch Blast, and if you don't Eldritch Blast, you're kind of wasting your time. Warlocks have 5 features that are optional that boost Eldritch Blast. The Ranger has 4 to 6 features that are not optional. So if you don't want to use Hunter's Mark, you are giving up 4 to 6 features. On the other hand, most of the Hunter's Mark features come very late in the career, much later than most games even go. So it's a problem that most people will never even hit. Okay, now that you understand just how tightly it is tied to Hunter's Mark, let's talk about the different options we have. At Ranger 1, besides Favored Foe, we also get spellcasting. This is a boost from 2014, because in 2014, we got spellcasting at level 2. Here, we're getting at first level, and that's helpful. I do want to say that spellcasting in general is great. It gives a lot of good options in combat and out of combat for offense, defense, and utility. The Rangers list is not the best list, but it does have some pretty good options. And it does have a lot of ones that don't compete with Hunter's Mark. You can go your entire career with Hunter's Mark and still using all your spell slots to do great and good things. But there are significant ones that do overlap with Hunter's Mark that I want to talk about and see just how much damage we're gaining or losing by using them. Here's a list of all the Ranger spells from level 1 to 5, and I've highlighted the ones that have potential conflict with Hunter's Mark. Things like Spike Growth are damage dealing, but in my mind they don't really conflict with Hunter's Mark. You use them in very different circumstances. First, let's take a look at how much damage Hunter's Mark really gives us. In this example, I'll be using a longbow, which in my mind is kind of the stereotypical ranger. Obviously, if you end up getting more attacks by something like 2-weapon fighting, Hunter's Mark will deal more damage. At level 1, without Hunter's Mark, we deal about 5.8 damage. With Hunter's Mark, we deal 8.25. So the increase in damage we get from Hunter's Mark is 2.5-ish. At level 5, with double attacks, it ends up at 5.6, and it stays that way until at level 17, we get Precise Hunter. This gives us advantage on all our attacks with Hunter's Mark. Just the fact that we have Hunter's Mark up gives us advantage on those attacks. That's going to boost our damage up, and it boosts it by about 11.7 damage per round. At level 20, our Hunter's Mark damage increases to a D10, and so that boosts us to about 15.8 damage per round from Hunter's Mark. So the damage that we get from Hunter's Mark doesn't increase for a very long time. From levels 5 to 16, it is the same damage boost. Alright, let's take a look at our first alternative to Hunter's Mark, the level 1 spell, Ensnaring Strike. This is basically like a Ranger's Smite spell. When you hit somebody, you can use a bonus action to attempt to entangle them and restrain them. They are restrained until someone uses an action to try to break them out. While they're restrained, at the beginning of their turns, they're going to take a little bit of damage, a d6 per spell level. Restrained gives you advantage on attacks against that enemy, and they have disadvantage on their attacks. So we will get that bonus, and in fact, everyone in the party is going to get that bonus too. And that can be pretty significant. It also might soak up an action or multiple actions as they attempt to break out. So before we even look at damage, Ensnaring Strike can be quite powerful. It is a strength saving throw, so chance to succeed is actually pretty low. Monsters tend to have pretty high strength scores. And we don't have great DCs because wisdom is not our main stat. So at level 1, we get the damage boost from having advantage on those attacks. I'm not going to include anyone else's advantage in the party, but we also get an extra d6 at the beginning of their turn. So in total at level 1, we get an extra 4.5 damage per round from Ensnaring Strike. And right now that's more than Hunter's Mark. At level 5, if we upcast it to spell slot 2, we end up dealing 5.4 damage per round. If we continue upcasting it to level 3, 4, and 5, we'll do this much damage. The damage from Ensnaring Strike is actually pretty comparable to Hunter's Mark, but remember that we are upcasting it for these damages, whereas Hunter's Mark is free castings or a level 1 spell. Even at high levels, I would probably just use level 1 spell slots here because it will get the restrained condition on them no matter what. Alright, for our level 2 spells, there really is only one competitor with Hunter's Mark, and that is Summon Beast. It's an action to cast, but on your turn you can give it a command to attack somebody as a free action. Its attack bonuses are based on your spell attack bonus, so it's not going to be as good as your attack, but here with our wisdom at 16, this is the damage we will get. Note that our beast has pack tactics, so we can attack with advantage if someone else is nearby. Here I've put the damage it would output with and without advantage. Also, I'm going to put the damage we lose by using our action to cast it as well. At level 5 and 9, the damage we gain is actually less than or about equal to what we get from Hunter's Mark. At level 13, when we upcast it to level 4, it then gets 2 attacks, and it deals significantly more damage than Hunter's Mark. Moving on to level 3 spells. The first contender here is Conjure Animals. This is a huge change from the 2014 version of Conjure Animals. This one kind of conjures a spectral animal, and anything that gets close to it, it will attempt to attack. They make a dex save, and if they fail, they take 3d10 damage. You can move it on your turn and make a bunch of enemies make this saving throw. Here, I'm just going to be comparing one target. Here's our DCs if we have a wisdom of 16, and the chance that an enemy will fail that dex saving throw. And this is the average damage we're going to deal per turn to one enemy. Also, since it's an action cast, we will lose our attack action for that turn, so we lose this much damage. In total, at level 9, if there's only one target, it's pretty comparable to Hunter's Mark. Obviously though, if there's a bunch of enemies, this is going to be much stronger. I should have said before, but I'm expecting the encounters to be 4 rounds. So we're losing 1 out of 4 attack actions if we're casting this spell. Okay, the next level 3 spell is Elemental Weapon. This is an action to cast. It makes your bow a +1 magic weapon, and all your attacks deal an extra d4 damage. This really should be a bonus action to cast. The damage gained from it is very minimal. Alright, the final 3rd level spell we want to look at is Summon Fae. This is a really loved summon spell because the Fae deals quite a bit of damage. Again, it's an action summon, but we can command it without any actions. Right now at level 9, it deals about 8 damage per round once we account for the lost damage from our action. I am assuming we're summoning a Fuming Fae, which can give itself advantage on its attacks. At level 13, we can upcast it to level 4 and give it twice as many attacks, so it'll deal about 16 damage per round. So if we want to do single target damage, this is a pretty good spell. Alright, moving on to some level 4 spell options. The first one is Conjure Woodland Beings. This essentially is like a Spirit Guardians. You have an emanation around you, and when someone enters that emanation, they take some damage. It also is half damage on a save, which is very good, especially considering that we have lower than average DCs. It is an action to cast, but it also gives us an added extra benefit where we can disengage as a bonus action on each of our turns. That's kind of good. Again, we're going to analyze the damage as if we were only dealing damage to one target. Obviously, with groups, this is going to deal way more damage, and it's going to be pretty good. We deal about 16.8 damage per round to one target. Of course, we lose our action, so some damage is lost there, so in total it's about 12.6. That is less damage than average from a summon Fae at this level, but if you have multiple targets, it's going to be much better. Since it's an emanation around you, obviously you're not going to want to do this with a ranged character. This is going to be much better with a 2-weapon fighter build. Alright, the next spell I want to look at is Grasping Vine. This one was really bad in 2014. Now, Grasping Vine is a bonus action, and you can use it to grapple a target, and it does damage too now. On average, it deals about 10.8 damage per round. The grappled condition can be decent. I would personally rather do an ensnaring strike and have them restrained. But Grasping Vine can drag people about 30 feet. So if someone else has a spike growth up, you could pull them all the way across. That could be pretty good. The other level 4 spell that could be a competitor to Hunter's Mark is Summon Elemental. Again, it's a summon spell that we use our action to create them, and then we can command it verbally, no action required. Unfortunately, Summon Elemental just isn't as strong as Summon Fae, so I would probably just do that instead. Okay, moving on to 5th level spells. The only real contender with Hunter's Mark here is Swift Quiver. This is a bonus action cast that lets you fire 2 additional arrows from your quiver. So you can do 2 with your action and 2 with your bonus action. Thankfully, now in 2024, when you cast the spell, you also get to shoot 2 arrows as part of the bonus action. So using our longbow will deal on average 16.3 damage per round. Note that this is not with advantage, and we do get some ranger features later that let us have advantage sometimes. So those combined could be really good with Swift Quiver. Alright, and this is a table going over all of our options, comparing them to Hunter's Mark. At level 1, Ensnaring Strike actually does a bit more damage. At level 5, Hunter's Mark actually does more damage than any of the other options. At level 9, we have some options that deal significantly more damage, not a ton. Ensnaring Strike and Summon Fae can be good damage dealing options. Of course, here we do get access to Conjure Animals, and if we have multiple combatants on the field, this could be a much better option. At level 13, this is where we get options that deal much more damage than our Hunter's Mark. Pretty much every option here does significantly more damage than Hunter's Mark. Once we get to 17, and Hunter's Mark gives us advantage on all our attacks, it becomes less clear. Also, now these are 5th level spells. So if your 5th level spell is doing close to what your free cast of Hunter's Mark is doing, then it really had better be worth it. And then at level 20, when Hunter's Mark goes to a D10, it's actually very close to all our options. Remember that this is assuming 2 attacks, so if you get a 3rd one in there, then Hunter's Mark will deal even more damage. So up to level 12, it's pretty solid to have Hunter's Mark as your concentration spell, and use your other spell slots for non-concentration things. Things like Lesser Restoration, Cure Wounds, Good Berry, or out of combat utility. Alright, now that that's kind of sorted, let's move on to the next feature we get at level 1, Weapon Mastery. This can be really great for 2-weapon fighters. They get the Nick property, and then they can attack and offhand attack without using that bonus action, so they can keep that for Hunter's Mark. Of course, you can pair the other weapon with something like Vex. Longbow is a classic ranger weapon, and it has the slow property. That'll let you kite your enemies a lot better and keep you out of danger. Heavy crossbow has the push property, and that can be pretty cool to push enemies around from range. Notably, hand crossbows have the Vex property, not the Nick property, so dual wielding them does not free up your bonus action. I do have a video all about weapon masteries, you can check it out here if you want. Alright, at level 2 we get Deft Explorer. This feature gives you additional languages and expertise in a skill. It feels very rangery. Knowing languages makes you feel like you're very well traveled, and expertise, well, we all know rangers are great survivalists or stealth or whatever. The other thing we get at level 2 is fighting styles. I went over all the fighting styles in the fighter video, so take a look there if you want to see. I did, however, misrepresent great weapon fighting. I had a mistake in my code. Thank you to Samuel Cockman for pointing that out, but I just want to clear that up that it is actually much better than I calculated it to be. As for Rangers, you're pretty much going to pick between 2-weapon fighting and archery. Rangers do have a special option to pick some druid cantrips, and that can be good for some niche builds. Level 3, we get subclasses. We're not going to talk about those here. At level 4, we get Feats. Here are some solid Ranger picks. Defensive Duelist, that can boost your defense quite a lot. Charger, if you're a melee character, that can help boost your damage and your control. Great Weapon Master, this does work for ranged weapons as long as they have the heavy property. Unfortunately, it doesn't sync very well because you have to boost your strength, and it gives you a bonus feature for melee attacks only. And we need a minimum of 13th strength just to pick it up. That's going to make the Ranger quite mad, multiple ability dependent. Sharpshooter was fantastic in 2014. It is still good now, just not nearly as good. It doesn't give you any boost to your damage, but it does let you ignore cover, shoot into melee, and shoot at very long ranges. If you have an ally that is going around toppling all the enemies, it might be nice if you can just walk right up next to them and shoot them right in the face, with advantage. Crossbow Expert is an option too, but remember that it's going to use our bonus action each turn. So if you're going to do something like Hunter's Mark, then Crossbow Expert is going to have big conflict with that. Unfortunately, there's just not a lot of feats that really synchronize with Ranger. Maybe the Speedy feat as well. But we're going to see that struggle a little bit later once we get to the build. Let me know if you think there's any feat that really screams Ranger to you. At level 5, we get Extra Attack, always great. At level 6, we get Roving. This increases our speed by 10 feet. It also gives you a climb speed and a swim speed. When those do come up, you'll probably feel really great. At level 9, we get Expertise in 2 more skills. Now you can be an even better survivalist. At level 10, we get Tireless. This is kind of an interesting one. It's the same as it was in Tasha's, but what it does is you can give yourself some temp HP a couple times a day, and when you short rest, you can decrease your exhaustion level by 1. The temp HP you get is a D8 plus your wisdom mod. At this level, that's not a lot. It's like a quarter of the damage one enemy would do to you. But it's something, so obviously you should start every encounter with this temp HP. Alright, level 13 we get Relentless Hunter. This is where we can't drop Hunter's Mark concentration due to damage. At this point in our career, we have 5 free uses of Hunter's Mark per day, and we have 11 other spell slots. Since it's a bonus action to cast, and we have so many uses, it feels like even if we do lose concentration, it's not a big deal. For melee characters, you're going to get hit a lot more, so it's a lot of concentration checks. You'll probably drop it fairly often, so this can be helpful then. But for ranged, I don't really see this being a lot of help. At level 14, we get Nature's Veil. Finally, something cool we can do in combat. As a bonus action, you can turn yourself invisible until the end of your next turn. So if you start your turn, bonus action invisible, that means you have 2 full actions of doing your attacks. So that's 4 attacks at advantage. Also, enemies will have disadvantage on their attacks against us because we're invisible. As far as I understand it, unless you hide, enemies still know where you are even if you're invisible. So it's just disadvantage. Now you can do this a number of times equal to your wisdom mod, but considering that most encounters are about 4 rounds, you could have one encounter that you're pretty much invisible the entire time. Level 17, we get Precise Hunter. This is now when we have advantage on all our attacks against the Hunter's Mark target. Remember that advantage we were getting from invisibility a couple levels back? Well, forget about it because you have advantage all the time now. But if you aren't using Hunter's Mark, you still can use that advantage. We already talked about the gains we get from this, and they're pretty significant. At level 18, we get Feral Senses. This gives us a blind sight of 30 feet. Blind sight is always great, and here is no exception. 30 feet blind sight is quite good. 2014 had something kind of the same, but here just having blind sight is much better. Level 19, we get our epic boon, and the one they suggest taking here is Boon of Dimensional Travel. It's a pretty cool one, where after you attack or do the magic action, you can teleport to somewhere within 30 feet. In my mind, that's such a cool image. You teleporting, attacking around the field, you probably would feel really cool doing it. Numerically though, it doesn't really give you much. It definitely can help you kite, or especially if you're melee, you can run in, attack, and then teleport out. So it definitely can save you from getting hit a lot more. For me, the way I calculate durability is you're just standing there taking attacks. So having this increased mobility doesn't affect much on the spreadsheet, unfortunately. I think obviously the better pick here is Boon of Spell Recall. Then you can cast Hunter's Mark way more times a day. Then at level 20, we get our boost to Hunter's Mark, so now it deals a d10. That is 2 extra damage per attack. It's not nothing, but it's not an exciting capstone by any stretch of the imagination. A lot of Ranger features are bumps to our utility, which can be nice, but it does end up lacking a little bit in terms of damage. It's nice to have a climb and a swim speed. It's nice to be able to overcome exhaustion more easily. It's nice to have blind sight. It's nice to have expertise, but it ends up being so many nice to haves and not enough real boosts to our combat capability. And I feel like Rangers are supposed to be damage dealers. I do want to say that Rangers are unique in that every single subclass boosts their damage. So the numbers that we're going to look at in this build in a second will be missing some damage. I'll do something that I don't normally do, and I'm going to show a build with the subclass attached and see how much damage we gain there too. I just want people to have a valid idea of what the class looks like as a whole. Other classes have some subclasses that boost damage and some subclasses that don't boost damage. But here in Ranger, they seem pretty important to our damage dealing. Okay, so for this stereotypical Ranger build, I'm going to use a longbow and I'm going to use Hunter's Mark. I think it's safe to say that Hunter's Mark is meant to be used. As we build though, we immediately see some problems once we get to level 4 and have to start picking feats. If we want to boost damage, we don't have a lot of great options. Great Weapon Master requires a strength of 13. Crossbow Expert uses our bonus action, and that's already taken up with Hunter's Mark. Sharpshooter doesn't directly give a damage boost. We could potentially take Skulker, but we're not hiding a lot. We could take Poisoner, but that's also using our bonus action. So it turns out that it's pretty hard to choose feats for the ranged Ranger. I think for us, we're gonna have to take Great Weapon Master and put 13 strength into our build. That means we'll have to drop our wisdom to a 13 too, meaning our spellcasting is gonna be even worse. That means we're gonna be even more reliant on Hunter's Mark. But if you're gonna ignore Hunter's Mark and do something like a summon, then having a bonus action attack will be quite useful. Like all our builds so far, at level 1 for the Origin feat, I'm gonna take Tough. Another great option here is Magic Initiate Wizard to pick up the Shield spell. That can help boost our defenses quite a bit. Okay, so level 4, I'll do Sharpshooter to boost our dex to an 18, then I'll do Great Weapon Master at level 8. At 12, we'll get a +2 to our dex to max it, and then at level 16, we'll boost our wisdom by 1 by taking a feat like Fey Touched or Observant, something like that. It's mostly utility though. Let's take a look at our damage now first. As I calculate damage, I will calculate DPR, damage per round, but I will also convert that DPR into something I call combat space. This is essentially what percentage of a deadly encounter can you take out by yourself in terms of HP. So that DPR directly translates into a percentage of a deadly encounter. It's just to give a general context to the numbers. It also helps you know how strong you will feel in that combat. So at level 1, if you're taking out 30% of a deadly encounter, and at level 20, you're taking out 10% of a deadly encounter, even though you're doing more damage, you'll feel less powerful. For us though, at level 1, we're actually feeling quite strong. It's actually the strongest we will ever feel. We continue being decent damage until about level 6. Then we taper off and just can never recover. The only boosts to damage we get are from Great Weapon Master when our proficiency goes up. At level 14, we get some advantage in the encounter, so that boosts us a little bit. And at 17, we have advantage on all our attacks. But these boosts are not significant enough to keep us feeling as powerful at late levels as we feel at early levels. At level 20, we are only taking out 24% of a deadly encounter. That's pretty miserable for a damage dealer. If we average out our combat space for the entire career, we can take out about 30% of a deadly encounter. Compare this to the fighter who on average takes out 45% of a deadly encounter. I guess the big exchange is you have a lot of out of combat utility and you have those spells. Well, hold on. Let's add the subclass because we know it boosts our damage. We will add the Hunter subclass onto this build and take a look at how much damage it deals now. We get a boost to damage at level 3, we can take Colossus Slayer. This gives us an extra d8 damage per turn. Then at level 11, we're going to gain another boost to our damage, where when you hit somebody with a Hunter's Mark, you can also redirect that and deal that same damage to somebody else. If we add in this hunter, the average damage we deal throughout our entire career is 36.5% of a deadly encounter. And that is a boost up from 30. The damage now is not bad. I do want to say though, the fighter we built was melee, and this one is ranged. Melee has had buffs to it, and ranged has had nerfs to it. I think this is healthy for the game because ranged was much better in 2014. First of all, you're a lot more likely to have a target to hit, you're a lot less likely to be hit, and you have much better mobility. Now, frontliners take the damage, but they can also dish it out too. I think that's a fair exchange. So I think the question is this damage enough? Considering that we're ranged, considering we also have spells to boost us up and a lot of out-of-combat utility, I wouldn't say that the Ranger is bad. I did make a 2-weapon fighting build, which I'll briefly show here, but early in the career, the damage is significantly better than the Longbow Ranger, but actually later in the career, the Longbow Ranger does more damage than the 2-weapon fighter. I do think though that there are a significant number of hiccups we have doing a ranged build. I think that 2-weapon fighting is actually going to be a better style for Rangers, maybe the default style for Rangers in 2024. We can take things like Defensive Duelist, we get things to turn invisible that gives us free disengages, the boon of dimensional travel, all these things kind of lean towards melee focused ones. So it's not my idea of what the stereotypical Ranger is, but I think it's going to be the main build. Now let's see how the 2014 Ranger compares in terms of damage. And actually, it's almost identical. So if you enjoyed Longbow Ranger in 2014, you will enjoy it in 2024. More, I'm sure. But take a look at this graph. Seriously, they're so close. And honestly, it's kind of sad. I think this will probably be the only martial that does the same damage as it does in 2014. But who knows? I haven't taken a look at Rogue or Paladin yet, and I think those might be similar. I do want to say, this Ranger build is in no way optimized. There are ways to deal much more damage with a Ranger, especially since you have all those options for spells. A good plan might actually be to use them as blast spells, but even if you use this stereotypical build, the damage output is still okay. Alright, now let's take a look at our build's control. Control is a weird one, but I have some way to measure it. What we do is we take the unconscious condition, give it the value of 100. Then we break it up into all the different subsections, and for each of those, we give it a value out of 100. Whenever you do one of those little control pieces, you do that much control. I do want to say straight out of the gate, Rangers do have a lot of ability for control. Things like Ensnaring Strike, Grasping Vine, all these things can have a significant effect on the battlefield. But if we're just doing the stereotypical build with Hunter's Mark, our control is pretty low. The only control we do get is from our slow mastery on our longbow. If we average out the control through our career, we deal on average 2.7 points of control per round. That's pretty low. But like I said, choose the right spells and Rangers can have a lot of control. Now, moving on to durability. This is how many rounds you can last if an entire deadly encounter was focused fire on you. For us, taking the tough origin feat gives us a significant boost to our durability already. Most things are pretty much the same as in 2014, except Nature's Veil was moved from 10 to 14. And we have a lower wisdom, so our Tireless temp HP we get is lower there too. All in all, the new Ranger can last 1.62 rounds before dropping, while the old Ranger could last 1.43 rounds. Alright, the last metric I want to look at is mental resistance. This is if this character had 3 wisdom saves it need to pass, what is the likelihood they will pass each of them, and then I average those out. For the Ranger, they don't really have anything to boost their saves, and this build Ranger was quite low wisdom because we had to move it into strength. So we actually end up with worse resistance than in 2014 because of that. On average, we will pass 29% of wisdom saves throughout our career. In 2014, we would pass on average 39% of wisdom saves. Neither of those are fantastic, so you might want to think about getting resilient wisdom at some point. Alright, let's take these numbers and insert the Ranger into our tier list. Right now, with the 3 classes we have, Ranger is dead last in almost every category. Of course, we do have quite a lot of classes to go, so we will see how it all pans out. Alright, so in summary, what do I think of the Ranger? I think overall I'm happy to see that ranged weapons are worse than melee weapons now, but having said that, I do think that Ranger could stand to deal more damage. Overall, I am unhappy with the reliance it has on Hunter's Mark. I know that a couple of them are new features that just didn't exist before, so it's just additional features, but it still feels bad to not use the features that you're given. At some levels, the alternatives are significantly more powerful than Hunter's Mark, but others, they're so close that it feels like a waste to not use Hunter's Mark since you have so many free uses. Then you can save those other spells to do more interesting things. Of course, you can just use Hunter's Mark as the backup, that once you've run out, you always have something that deals extra damage, so it can be good. It just feels yucky to have 4 to 6 features that get totally wasted if you choose not to do Hunter's Mark, especially since the non-Hunter's Mark features are kind of rarely used anyway because of exploration. Alright, well that was the Ranger. Hopefully you got a better view of what this whole package entails and can have further, better discussions on whether the Ranger is good or not. I have put out a survey for you to choose the next class that we're going to analyze by the numbers. Please vote on what you want to see. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have a great day.